And we begin tonight with Dr. Boyce-Smith, who's a general internist with 14 years of private practice and teaching experience here in San Francisco. He has training and practice also in liaison psychiatry and served on the board of the National Alliance for Mental Illness in San Francisco. Welcome.
Thank you.
I am totally intrigued by what you sent me, but I was prompted by a Chronicle editorial, surprisingly, called, well, it was a political whack at the mayor for dropping Laura's Law. Okay, so I noted that, asked myself, what is Laura's Law? I heard about it, and as I started to investigate, I realized this is the key to so many issues facing families, groups, and certainly the people in San Francisco who are living on the streets. But we're not going to talk about that last group. We're going to talk generally about how we got here, okay? It's my understanding that it's been very difficult. We used to have mental institutions, like in Napa. You remember those?
Yes, I do.
Why were they all closed down?
Well, you and I have a different impression of that history, but I think that was a short-sighted budgetary decision that a famous governor, Reagan, made at the time to close those institutions. I think there probably was some notion that those folks were being held prisoner and that was against their will, and therefore it would have been better.
We do have, I mean, the historical fact is that the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, went to court and basically said these people have rights, and unless they're going to be a harm to someone or to themselves, they cannot be incarcerated in a mental institution.
But the argument to close the state hospitals was supposed to be mirrored with a community mental health, rich community mental health services that were going to offer, outpatient services for those folks who needed them. And we haven't had any diminution in the number of people with mental illness over now those 30 years. In fact, we have instead a jail system that has taken over from the state hospital system.
Inadequately, obviously. I mean, the Tescadero is obviously for dangerous criminals who have been convicted of dangerous crimes.
No, but conservative estimates would have the entire prison system and jail system at 11 to 12% of undiagnosed, untreated mentally ill
I wouldn't
patients.
disagree. I wouldn't disagree. But then an incident occurs that changes all this in Nevada County.
Yes.
All this freedom for those who are mentally ill, that we can just leave them alone and no one need to take responsibility for them as long as they're not harming anyone. It started what I see as a major change, which this program is going to deal with over the next several months. And you're doctor, you're the first one, because I think it's so important. So what happened in Nevada County a few years ago?
This was a Dartmouth sophomore. Her name was Laura Wilcox. She was home for Christmas vacation, and she was doing a volunteer job at a mental health agency. And a 41-year-old, last name Scott, I believe, who was paranoid schizophrenic, not on medication. Family was trying and had failed to force treatment and to get him the help that he needed, took a gun and went into a psychotic phase and apparently showed up at this agency and shot her.
Killed her.
Killed her. And so that was a huge tragedy. It made the papers. It got a lot of attention in Sacramento. And eventually, after a lot of back and forth in the legislature, a bill was passed, I think it was calendar year '02, signed by Governor Davis at the time, and that is what we're referring to as Laura's Law or AB 1421. And that actually would lead to forced treatment. Some would say forced, some would say medically necessary, for assisted outpatient treatment, AOT is the term, for somebody in a situation like that gentleman who the family was desperately trying to get him help. There was no way to force him to get into therapy. And
his own family knew he needed help.
Yes.
And the signs were there.
Yes, yes. And so he was at risk, and there could have been an intervention, but there wasn't. Everybody stood back, and then the tragedy occurred.
So this law that was passed here, and it was based on what I think they call the Kendra model in New York.
Right.
In other words, that had been around significantly reducing, significant statistical progress in the number of people who went back to prison, people went back to substance abuse, those who went back to hospitals, just the kind of thing we're seeing here where people are constantly coming in and going out. The results were incredible in New York.
That's right. That's why I'm so really pleased that you're taking on this issue, because whenever the law is implemented, when Kendra's law in New York or Laura's law, as it was implemented in the one major county that's taken it on, which is Los Angeles County, huge decrease in the spinning through the jails, the spinning in and out of hospitalizations without adequate follow-up, letting somebody be discharged too soon without fully being stabilized or still being in a psychotic state. All of that goes away because there's an aggressive outpatient treatment program. Required.
Strong, not just induced, not just strongly recommended, but required. Court mandated. And people have been asking this question, and what was the, remember what prompted this is the Chronicle was saying, why if Los Angeles has implemented, and actually what the law, as I understand, did, it allowed each county to enforce Laura's law. It didn't require each county. And this county, San Francisco County, with the largest homeless population, and a lot of other nuts, in my opinion, that roam the streets that are not homeless, you would think this county, more than any other, would need this tool to prevent violence and other kinds of dangers, but it's not being enacted here. And I promised you we would not get political, but it's not being enacted here, and the Chronicle called the mayor to task for it because I think he understands that it's necessary, but there's not the political will there. But I mean, Nevada County, of course, was the first county because that's where Laura was killed. But Los Angeles adopted it, and it requires resources, doesn't it?
Correct, yes. But these are resources that exist, and you would argue if you were really looking at the budget dollars and the money spent on jails and the significant money spent on hospitalization, that if you can keep somebody out of jail who's there for a mental health reason, not for really a criminal reason, keep somebody out of a hospital bed for the 2 to 3 week stay that is a typical psychiatric admission, prevent all that, the money is there for the outpatient treatment to take place.
They can be required for almost 180 days to be under treatment, am I right?
Correct. It can be for a full 6 months, and it can be renewed at the end of 6 months.
Now, I want to bring up only one thing that did come to mind, because we know that this doesn't just apply to the people on the streets of San Francisco who are homeless and crazy for one reason or another, or just organically crazy, not just substance abuse crazy, but families. You remember that? You mentioned that this individual that murdered her, the family knew that he needed help.
Yes, and I really would, in our course of our discussion, if we can, I'd like to think of this not so much as the downtrodden homeless, as so much as it's across the entire spectrum of all walks of life. This is the exact same incidence of 1 out of 5 families, whether it's white collar, whether it's wealthy, as it is whether it's blue collar or uninsured.
That
1 out of 5 families will have someone in their family with a very severe mental illness.
We're not just talking about depression or reacting to life's ups and downs. We're talking about something severe.
Depression that could be, lead to suicide.
1 out of every 5?
1 out of 5 families. Yes, very, very common. And the other aspect to this is that this is very treatable. People are not quite getting this. When the original legislation was enacted, and maybe the ACLU had a hand in it, as you suggest, people were thinking, well, there's nothing to do, so let's just protect these people because they're just going to vegetate somewhere anyway. Well, now that's not the case. There's wonderful medications for acute psychotic paranoid schizophrenia. There's great medications for bipolar illness. People can be treated. This is a very hopeful, positive. We have graduates who have gone through, who have been on lock wards, who are giving speeches, who are educating the police department, who are educating public policy makers, folks who are actually on our board who have had serious mental illness but are doing fine in this day and age. So the hopeful aspect of this, as opposed to the scary aspect of this, I think is at the heart of this miscarriage of the public policy.
The only one reservation, I have to bring it up, is what do you do for the situation where a family is going to try to impose this upon another family member? It seems like if you didn't watch it, you could gang up on someone. Someone's rights could be abused by a group intervention saying that he needs or she needs to be into this accelerated or assertive treatment system as a way of getting back at someone. So where are the rights for well,
the
much like execution, the argument for death penalty, to protect those who are innocent. Tell us the process that someone would be, the safeguards. Where are the safeguards someone couldn't sabotage someone's life by claiming they were mentally ill?
Yeah, you're raising an excellent point. So in the course of applying, first off, it's not the family member that can even bring a writ. You apply to a court, but it first has to be generated by a mental health professional, a behavioral health specialist, psychiatrist. So the person who's most experienced professionally in treating that individual has to be the petitioner to the court. Family members obviously in support, but then secondly, if there's any issue like what you're suggesting, a public defender or an attorney that the individual can pick to represent himself is legally there to represent, because it is a legal proceeding.
If I may interrupt you, that mental health professional is the one who petitions the court, not the family, not the police, not the health department, but a mental health professional. That means they've examined the patient.
Yes.
Do you believe there's a chance that a person can either disguise their illness during that process, or just the opposite, apparently be severe enough for that mental health professional to claim, yeah, this person, I'm going to petition the court on this. Can someone be falsely charged with being mentally ill is what I'm asking you.
More often, with respect to the false identification, more often the individual can rise to the occasion and minimize their symptoms rather than the other way around.
So you're professional. I mean, I'm asking you this question professionally, and you're saying that it would probably be the other way around.
Yes.
But when you do your practicing, when you're with those who are severely mentally ill, if they do this puffing up, does it escape you, or can you see it?
Well, the professional might, somebody who's really in a borderline situation and family's saying this person's really wildly acting out, and they see them behaving semi-normally or close to being normal, and they have questions, then what they should really do is take time. They should see them more than once and see them in different settings and make a careful decision, because the court will challenge and the individual making this petition. Plus, it's not a one-way street. You can make a decision, okay, let's try the assisted outpatient treatment session for a month, for a week, for whatever, and see, and the court might say, well, this seemed to be a borderline situation to us. We're not going to impose 6 months, and take away civil liberties here.
Yes.
We're going to try for a week or two, and we want you to report back.
We have, unfortunately, run out of time. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have you come back rather quickly. I mean, because I think it's very important that we take up from where we are right now. In other words, where the mental health professional has gone to court.
Yeah.
I want to go through the whole process so the public understands that the mechanisms are in place and the value. Okay, Doctor?
Okay.
And thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
We'll get you back real quick.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.